Hello everyone, it's your host, SethTheProgrammer, and today we're going to be doing another Hokage breakdown video. I know a lot of people are questioning this one, but this one is being made due to high requests and because I made a breakdown on the second, third, and fourth Hokages being underrated. I thought I'd try to go out of my way and see if I could prove Hashirama Senju is a bit stronger than people thought as well, and maybe give him a little bit of credit on his journey, which a lot of people underestimate. As a lot of people say, oh, the second Hokage was the best, which, that's contentious, people debate about it, but a lot of people seem to downplay the first Hokage's influence on the shinobi world and what he actually went through to get where he was. So this is hard considering Hashirama is just a blatant, huge, wood tree arm ooga booga man that slaps around every tailed beast on screen whenever he's shown, and literally Sun's the pretty much main antagonist of the series, but regardless, I think I have some pretty interesting insight for fans of the character that you may have never thought of regardless. That out of the way, if you're a fan of Naruto and talks like these, I'd recommend liking and maybe subscribing. It really means a lot. Thank you. The first thing I want to talk about is something I actually find needs to be talked about a lot more in the community than you would think, and it's surprising what people used to downplay Hashirama. I know, downplay is not something you'd think you'd hear, but it's actually a thing. This downplay tends to be concerning Hashirama's death. So, before we go and prove how powerful he is, let's first prove he can go beyond this little hurdle here, that being the potential of him being killed by Kakuzu of the Akatsuki. This theory is often theorized since we never hear how Hashirama exactly died, and it's implied Kakuzu faced him. Kakuzu having faced him and surviving with Hashirama no longer being around sort of implies Kakuzu did good, right? Well, not exactly. The problem with Kakuzu is that we unfortunately never got to explore his story and lore in the main manga materials due to pacing constraints, but his lore is actually fully described in the data books where it is described nowhere else. The impetus that got Kakuzu to find a way to cross through time was around the dawning of the hidden villages, just as they were being formed. One of the elite of the village hidden in the waterfalls, Kakuzu, is assigned to a mission to assassinate the Hokage Hashirama. However, he suffers a loss in the face of a wood-style hijutsu or secret jutsu and escapes. He barely makes it out alive. When he returns to his village, he is showered with dishonor and severe punishment. Bitterly angry over this unfair treatment after having risked his life for his village, Kakuzu breaks out of his cell. He takes with him the village's prized forbidden jutsu and the hearts that he carves out of his village's elders. Basically, after facing down against EMS Madara, or Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan Madara, and creating peace, the Hidden Waterfall wanted someone to take down Hashirama to take Konoha down a peg. This assassin Kakuzu was more than likely grabbed by the ankle by one of Hashirama's trees and then whipped to the ground and basically one-shotted. Not only did Kakuzu face Hashirama, but he did it before he was even immortal, with Hashirama more than likely sparing him or only trying to incapacitate him, considering he was rather merciful to begin with until after Madara attacks Konoha. A better theory for Hashirama's death is probably something more akin to a disease or advanced aging. This is because, as we know, forced regeneration causes cells to age and the body to die faster, since the cells in Naruto only replicate so many times before death. So, Hashirama, having fought Madara and Uchiha pretty much every day for years until adulthood, had probably regenerated a ton, thus shortening his lifespan. This theory is supported because despite the fact Hashirama became Hokage, he implies that Tobirama or Madara will be next rather soon, despite Tobirama and Madara actually being pretty much the same age as him. Another theory as well is that he got the chakra illness, which afflicted both Hagoromo and Naruto in only maybe his 20s or early 30s. So, of course, if Hashirama got inflicted with this disease, it might have taken him out as well. But I like the aging theory more. With that meme out of the way, we can get into more of the actual scaling of Hashirama Senju. Before he had become what Madara, Uchiha, and many other would refer to as the ultimate shinobi, Hashirama was a youth fighting in the warring states of the shinobi world. During their battles against the Uchiha, the average life expectancy was reduced to 30 years old for both shinobi and citizens alike during this time. However, this was mainly due to children being thrown into life or death battles against clans that kept it mainly so low, with the prime example being Hashirama's brother Kawurama Senju dying at just the age of 7 at the hands of the Uchiha and Hagoromo clans. This would cause Hashirama to more adamantly question the state of the world around him, to the point he would openly challenge his father Butsuma Senju in front of his brothers, and even would be struck for it. Butsuma's response to Hashirama that it was the peak of a parent's duty to raise their children to fight for their family and clan, and for them to die, they were no longer just children, but shinobi. This respect for fighting to the death is not something Hashirama would recognize at all, and was thrown into what he would describe describe as a haziness in his heart. This grief and depression that would normally cause people to hate only caused Hashirama to think even more about what he could do and if things could change in the world. To wash away these feelings, he would go to a nearby stream where he would meet another kindred spirit named Madara. Both he and Madara had lost brothers and were in a haze, even if they both didn't know it, but Hashirama assumed this of him and wanted to befriend him. Hashirama was more optimistic than Madara and believed that things could be changed and that there has to be something deeper in people to help them connect to each other, whereas Madara was conflicted on this idea, as he was someone who deeply loved his brothers and could understand people, yet simultaneously didn't believe that you could learn someone else's true guts or their true thoughts. This confliction was represented through them skipping stones, in which Hashirama was sure of his ambition and dream, and Madara was filled with doubt. But as the meetings went on, Madara would eventually start to agree with and befriend Hashirama, and eventually his stone too would reach the other side of the stream. However, Madara would still have a degree of distrust, his brothers being lost one by one. He didn't have many that could understand him. This is somewhat symbolized by Madara not being comfortable with people standing behind him, as he didn't have anyone he thought he could trust or lead. Eventually, Hashirama and Madara would spar against each other. We learned that they even eclipsed many adults of their clans. Considering that the Senju and Uchiha clans they were a part of were the strongest clans in the world, it's no exaggeration to say that Madara and Hashirama, even before developing almost any of their abilities, were already at the apex of said ability. Not their own potential per se, but of the world around them. The two boys then agreed that the only way for them to ever change the world was to obtain massive reserves of power and abilities that nobody could ignore. After Butsuma Senju and Tajima Uchiha caught wind of these meetings of their children, they would intervene and try to use the opportunity to kill each other. Being equals, they would try to weaken each other's resolves by racing to kill the other's youngest child first, those youngest children being Izuna and Tobirama, who were present during the battle. Madara and Hashirama are able to intercept those two attacks, once again proving they are top tiers even at this stage of their lives, and Madara reveals his Sharingan. He states that his stone already reached the other side, and that he believed that your guts truly couldn't be revealed to others, and he wouldn't forgive the clan that killed his brothers. However, Hashirama still believed. Hashirama, still believing, trained and honed his powers and abilities to their apex, with Madara being absorbed by darkness and hatred that swelled his ocular powers to their limits. Hashirama fought Madara and the Uchiha day after day until Izuna was fatefully defeated by Tobirama. This would be a turning point for the war, and many Uchiha began to actually give up on these wars, with the Senju being at the clear advantage. However, Izuna's death would confer hate onto Madara, and he wouldn't accept peace just yet. He still didn't believe you could see each other's guts. Madara would eventually return with the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, also known as his brother's eyes, which he implanted into himself, and the Perfect Susanoo, and in a battle that lasted an entire day, was finally defeated by Hashirama and hit the ground on his back for the first time. Hashirama once again pleads for peace and begs Madara to try and read his guts. Madara, true to his words when they were kids, doesn't believe there's a point in showing your guts to those that have killed your brothers and family, and mocks Hashirama by saying to kill himself or his brother right in front of him, in which Hashirama, surprisingly to Madara, accepts. Hashirama is stopped from trying to kill himself by Madara, and peace is finally reached. The now-to-be-made village is named by Madara as Konoha, and many children can now live life without war and suffering, and can learn to play and love instead of fighting to the death day by day. The rest of the ninja world would also agree, although one of these new villages would send a certain assassin to go and get beat up by Hashirama. In talks of becoming the Hokage, Tobirama explained how only Hashirama could be Hokage and that nobody would follow Madara like they did him. Tobirama then confessed negativity of the Uchiha despite peace being around, which Hashirama tells him to shut up about, but Madara was listening the entire time. These talks only reinforced Madara's opinion that this peace was only simply quiet conflict that would explode one day, with the Senju asserting too much dominance and authority over the Uchiha being on the horizon. After foreseeing this eventual downfall of the village and realizing the contradictions and duality of shinobi, Madara left the village and began to plan for the infinite Tsukiyomi to create a world without the shinobi duality, and of course, his faith in Hashirama is slightly tilted as he now begins to doubt if Hashirama would have ever killed Tobirama to actually prove his guts to him. There would be no more desire for conflict with the infinite Tsukiyomi, there would be no losers wherever there would be winners, no cycle of hatred, only positive utility and well-being in the world would remain. These dreams of the far future would cause Madara to collect the Nine Tails and challenge the Hokage to a battle. Hashirama was a peerless and ultimate shinobi, but against Madara and the Nine Tails at the same time, this might prove different than a normal encounter. Despite being able to hold off the Nine Tails and Madara at the same time in just his base state, deflecting Bijou Damas and even fending off Madara with his implied time reversal abilities, if you include the Cyber Connect canon of the video game, which is actually considered canon to the series, and he can actually reverse time in his battle with Hashirama, and his internal Mangekyo Sharingan amps, Madara and the Nine Tails would eventually form the majestic attire Susanoo, which Hashirama could do nothing but run from. To almost seemingly mock Hashirama, Madara would blast a Bijou Dama from one shore to another and say he's already reached it. This is in reference to them skipping stones as children, and is Madara displaying that he is sure in his beliefs and unconflicted to battle Hashirama. Hashirama acknowledges this claim and unleashes his Sage Mode and creates the 1,000 arm statue, and in a pitch fight is able to subdue the Nine Tails and rip apart the Susanoo. During the battle, Mito Uzumaki becomes the Nine Tails Jinchuriki and helps to take Kurama off of the battlefield, which leads only Hashirama and Madara to their duel. After more fighting, Hashirama eventually catches Madara by surprise and stabs him from behind after using a wood clone. Madara being caught from behind is symbolic, as it represents that Madara actually did trust Hashirama and never expected him to stab him from behind, but Hashirama had to change, and he wanted to protect this dream even if he had to sacrifice others to do it. This very duality is what Madara feared, but Hashirama could not see that. Unfortunately though, it was too late. Hashirama would then create more world peace by distributing an equal power to all of the new villages and end all of the minor conflicts of the world, being hailed as a god of shinobi. Before dying, he would entrust his will of fire onto the next generations to try and protect and build up the dreams he and Madara had when they were younger. This is Hashirama during his life from what we know, but as we know, Hashirama has more direct comparisons to the next generations as well when he is reanimated, which is probably more relatable for more viewers. When reanimated as a zombie with barely any of his original power or personality, he is forced to face off against Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, under orders from Orochimaru. Hiruzen is an older man who Hashirama once conveyed his will of fire onto when he was younger, but this Hiruzen, even when an old man and no longer in his prime, is still considered the strongest of the current 5 Kage, stronger than the current Raikage Tsuchikage Inoki, Kazekage Rasa, and Mizukage Mei, all of which have great feats in their own rights, with Inoki being able to stop a full Tengai Shinsei meteor from Madara with Gaara's help, who's relative to Rasa, give or take, the Raikage scaling to be even more powerful than an 8 Tails perfect Jinchuriki, and so on. Even as an Edo Tensei himself, Hiruzen is shown directly even scaling above the entire Shinobi Alliance, and is shown facing down against Guru Guru Zetsu, pretty much by himself, Guru Guru Zetsu being a force who destroyed the entire Shinobi Alliance and the 5 Kage pretty much single-handedly. So the fact that Ultra Zombie Hashirama, who is in a very bad and amateur Edo Tensei state, is able to whip around and give Hiruzen a hard time in just his base is extremely telling and shows just how powerful a force the last generation used to be. In this fight, Hashirama also displays a genjutsu called Bringer of Darkness, which is basically an anti-Sharingan genjutsu that destroys all visible eyesight. It kind of makes you wonder how a character like Itachi or Shisui would be able to fight under these circumstances or conditions. Of course, a character like Kakashi or Hiruzen have an insane sense of smell or senses and can kind of fight through it, but other characters might be more hard-pressed by that simple trick alone. You'd be a little bit surprised, let alone Hashirama's already pretty much peerless power on top of that. Hashirama, on top of this peerless power and a decent genjutsu, also has insane regeneration that rivals or surpasses even Tsunade's 100 healing technique, with him being able to heal without even weaving hand signs. He is also able to regenerate his chakra and power through Sage Mode, given enough time, on top of being able to fight an entire day against someone like Uchiha Madara, someone who Kabuto and Dan Kato thought only Hashirama could ever hope to face. Hashirama is then reanimated again by Orochimaru, but with a far superior summoning method, and is more able to use his abilities than before. Although not perfect, he can use a good portion of them. Hashirama, once revived, creates a Crimson Ray barrier alongside the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Hokages, with this barrier being mainly powered by Hashirama, considering he is the strongest at this point in time, considering he was peerless to the 2nd Hokage, the 3rd Hokage is nowhere near his prime even when reanimated, and is stated by Iruka to not be above the other Hokage now that he is old, debate aside, and the 4th Hokage Minato being shocked by Hashirama's powers and base, being able to almost destroy and obliterate a house by simply his aura alone, with nobody else being credited Madara's level but him. So this Crimson Barrier that can withhold a Bijou Bomb from the Ten Tails is pretty much within Hashirama's pay grade. On top of this, Hashirama shows a new technique, the Deity Gates, which can even suppress the Ten Tails entirely and survive attacks from it. Eventually, Hashirama meets the Ten Tails Jinchuriki Obito and admits he is stronger than him, but it isn't that simple yet. We'll get into that later. Before that, Hashirama must face down against his old friend Madara once again, but this time Madara has received a new power-up, Hashirama Cells, and the Renegon on top of an extremely refined Edo Tensei, probably more refined than his. Not only does Madara have a ton of new power-ups, but Hashirama has many clones roaming the battlefield to help the Shinobi Alliance, which is referenced as a direct nerf to the original's power, confirmed by both Tobirama and Madara. So not only is Madara comparatively at a higher advantage, but Hashirama is now nerfed. Despite this, Hashirama and Madara fight down to the wire, with Hashirama not being strong enough to use his 1,000 arm statue in his Edo state, at least from what we know. Eventually, Hashirama's chakra is drained out of Sage Mode and he is forced to face off against Madara only in base. Despite this, he still restrains Madara and finds a way to negate his Renegon abilities, which he has never seen before, using Wood Style. With the help of Naruto, he is able to turn the tides or their stalemate or pseudo-stalemate for good and fully suppresses Madara under his deity gates. This is interesting because it makes you wonder, surely Madara will be stronger with his actual Renegon and living body, as it's implied when he's actually revived and easily busts out of Hashirama's gates. Hashirama seems to imply he's getting stronger now, so what I'm pushing forward here is that perhaps it's possible that before his death and when he mastered the deity gates, that Hashirama became quite stronger as well, not only just Madara. He didn't just stagnate after Madara's supposed death, enough to potentially rival a double Renegon Madara if they were both alive. Considering blind alive Madara might be stronger than Edo Madara with both Renegon, and Edo Madara thought that with Sage Mode he could potentially take down Ten Tails Obito, it's not in the realm of impossibility for Hashirama to do the same. As a reminder, Sasuke and Naruto have very incomplete sets of abilities, Naruto only having half of the Nine Tails and Sasuke having an incomplete Susanoo together. It almost seems like they are constructing a parallel to what Hashirama already obliterated when he was alive and arguably weaker than his prime. So is it possible that Hashirama when he was alive could have taken down the Ten Tails Jinchuriki? Yes, it is definitely possible. Considering Madara thinks it's even in the realm of possibility when they are Edo Tensei, this is also somewhat confirmed by even Sage Naruto's abilities being able to hurt Ten Tails Obito if they have a direct hit, since the Ten Tails didn't have a resistance to Senjutsu being Hashirama's pretty much literal name. Madara, of course, has many feats that would scale to Hashirama, such as manhandling the Nine Tails Jinchuriki no effort, launching meteors from outer space, destroying all 5 Kage at the same time, casually destroying Edo Tobirama in an instant 1v1, easily murdering Sasuke, Naruto, and all the tailed beasts by himself at the same time while nerfed, and so forth. Honestly, with all of this in mind, it doesn't make me surprised that simply having Hashirama's cells on your body would give any shinobi a massive steroid amp to their abilities and would bring everyone who did them to an insane levels of status and power, basically carrying people like Obito, Uchiha, Orochimaru, and Danzo throughout their careers. It's literally a verse that pretty much struggles with just slivers of the Nine Tails power, and here you have Hashirama pretty much bullying the full thing, no problem. At the end of the day, while Madara's descent into darkness swelled his powers, Hashirama's desires for peace and desire to be heard spurred his powers. Also, to end it all off, Hashirama finally meets his old war comrade on the battlefield, Madara, and says to him it was never about what they themselves could accomplish, but what as a community and as what these generations together could accomplish, as Hashirama did not just embody his own dream, but also the will of fire, which embodied the dreams of many looking for the end of the cycle of hatred. He was just that strong because he had to be.